pretty good militant demonstration, well attended when you consider that it was pouring rain. We terrorized a couple of those bosses and restaurant chain owners, and it got around too. Following morning, it was on the website of some major newspapers like USA Today and MSNBC and a few others. So it was a good action. Also, before I forget it, let me remind folks that next Saturday we're having a low-wage worker solidarity assembly at Local 808 of the Teamsters. Many of you familiar with that. That's in Long Island City. It's an organizing meeting to figure out the next steps, but more importantly, how we can push this movement in a left militant, anti-capitalist direction while still making sure that it's popular and inclusive, not exclusive. But I want to focus comrades and friends' attention on next week. You know, I so appreciated and enjoyed Imani's report on May Day. I know it's in the paper, but you know, other branches did some pretty good stuff, particularly Baltimore and Philadelphia and some other branches, and you know, you need to know about that too, because it was unprecedented in some instances. Here in New York, we tried, that is the party and the mass organizations we work with, and you know, we have a lot of responsibility for the whole thing, for Union Square, the march, making the banners, making the placards, the sound. You know, we're sort of responsible more than anybody else. It's always been that, and you know, we accept it proudly. We accept that responsibility proudly. So it's difficult for us to have a presence ourselves. But nonetheless, we try to have a presence and dedicate that presence to solidarity with the $15 an hour struggle and low-wage workers. You know, and we did. And it was very timely because we had in mind what is coming next Thursday. I don't know how many of you have the time in your busy lives to focus on what's happening. It's getting around. I hope it won't take me too much time, but I'm going to read the article that was in the Business Insider, which took his article mostly from the Wall Street Journal. This is about next Thursday. Fast food workers, the headline is, Fast Food Workers Plan Massive Global Protests. And if I'm not mistaken, I think this is their third protest. The first one, national protests, there was a local one in New York. That was maybe about a year and a half ago. Then there were 30 cities. Then there were 100 cities, I think, in December of 2013. And so this is the third one. Please correct me if I'm mistaken. Fast food workers are gearing up for a massive protest next week that will span 150 U.S. cities and more than 30 countries. It is expected to be the biggest fast food worker protest ever organized. Union representatives announced the May 15th protest at a news conference outside McDonald's in New York on Wednesday. And I should add that at that press conference, they had the flags of all the countries where there'll be protests. You know, protesters are calling for $15 hourly wage in the U.S. McDonald's caught wind of this planned protest last month and asked its global regional security team, whatever the hell that is, to monitor the situation, according to an internal email obtained by the Wall Street Journal. The overseas protests will involve 33 countries on 6 continents and targets not only McDonald's, but Burger King, Wendy, and Kentucky Fried Chicken. I think more, but those are the big ones. Fast food workers have been holding a number of strikes since 2013 for higher pay, and this is a list. I guess they got this from the union. This is a list of the countries beside the U.S. Africa, Morocco, and Malawi. In Asia, 30 cities in Japan, Hong Kong, Korea, India, the Philippines, Thailand, in Europe, Belgium, all over the UK, 20 cities, Germany, Ireland, Italy, South America, Brazil, Argentina, Central America and the Caribbean, El Salvador, Panama, the Dominican Republic, etc. So, this is, in a way, the first global strike of a big sector of low-wage workers. And, no doubt this is an escalation of this struggle that, believe me, the workers are deeply invested in it. And the unions, particularly SEIU, the Service Employees International Union, with all the faults of its leadership, they're deeply invested in it too, because they know what's at stake. This is the direction that the labor movement has to go, to do something on behalf of and organize low-wage workers. And these are millions, just those chains that I mentioned, that's about 2 million workers, with McDonald's being way ahead of most of them. But those other chains, have anywhere from 20 to 300,000 workers, in 100,000 different locations when you add them all together. Most of those locations outside of the United States, What's driving this? I say this because I hear the cynicism about SEIU, and the cynicism is valid. Some say, well, this is not a real organizing campaign. It's more of a public relations thing. They're not really organizing the workers. They're top heavy, and they've got a publicity firm doing it, and they get a few workers out, and they throw a few money at it and get some media there, and they're trying to do it with mirrors, and why aren't they in all these places, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And some of that is legitimate. There is no question that the leadership of SEIU. Now, you have to respect this. This is the largest union, I believe, at this point in the United States. And it's mostly low-wage workers, black and brown people, So let's not get too caught up. The leadership is one thing. The rank and file is another thing. Very dynamic. Janitors, hospital workers, restaurant workers, and so forth. But I think that the movement, many people who are much more radical than the leadership of SEIU are missing something. You have to add to the no surprising weaknesses of the leadership of SEIU the fact that they are pioneering, because their organizing is on the largest scale. UFCW is doing some other unions are doing some. Their organizing is on the largest scale. They're pioneering organizing low-wage workers at a time when capital is very strong in relationship to labor, particularly organized labor, on a global basis. When all we've heard mostly, with some notable exceptions like, Seattle and so forth, is pushbacks, cutbacks, union busting, take your pension, take your health care, throw you out of the union, slice your wages in half. So this is an offensive struggle. Very important to remember that. And they're learning about the terrain. And we should learn from it too, because there are some things about how capitalism has changed that they're learning in SEIU that we can learn, and also the low-wage workers, particularly the fast food workers. Number one is that you can't do it exactly the way that the radicals and the militants and the communists and the socialists organize. For example, the auto industry. There were hundreds, perhaps 1,000 plants. I don't know exactly, but that's a finite number. The plants had hundreds and thousands of workers. Even today, GM's got about 500 plants around the world. Some of those plants having 50, some have 100, some may have a few thousand. The industry has shrunken. We all know that. McDonald's has 35,000 restaurants. About 15,000 of them are here. A chain like Subway has 41,000 restaurants. Half of them are outside the United States. And comparatively speaking, it's the same thing for Burger King and Wendy's. In other words, these are tens of thousands of job locations with how many workers? maybe 2 shifts. If they're 24 hours, maybe 3. 24 to 30 workers. Maybe a large one would have 50 workers, like the McDonald's on 42nd Street, which I'll get back to later. You know, what the movement is finding out in a very incipient stage is that if you can't go to all those work sites and organize large numbers of workers in mass, in tandem, then you've got to start a movement. But here's the good part. When you're dealing with a section of the working class that's so numerous, millions of workers, and has so many work sites in so many places, next door, in communities, you know, in shopping centers, it's easy to build a movement that is strong someplace but has an effect on other places where it's weaker. It's dynamic, it's dialectical, and we're learning this. Also, they've learned that they've got to do more militant stuff. And, you know, perhaps it's a small point, but it's worthy to note. They borrowed some of their tactics from Occupy Wall Street. They got the idea, well, gee, they sat down, they occupied a plant. Maybe we ought to start calling strikes. Well, maybe they're not strikes that involve 50% or even 100 or 100% of the workers. Maybe they're strikes that involve anywhere from 2 to 5% of the work of those workers. And 2 to 5% of several million workers, do the math. You know, it has an effect. It helps build this movement. And also, they're realizing in this stage of global capitalism at a dead end, and capitalism and the working class organized on such a global level, where geography means less and less, their struggle has to be global. And this is the one where they're taking it there. And just think about consciousness and radicalism. Finally, there's a global strike of low-wage workers. Maybe not a perfect one, maybe not with the density of percentage of those workers that we'd like, but a global strike. You know, it's bringing back this whole question of a strike. You know, so comrades, this is an event that we should watch. It's bound to have repercussions. It's going to open up the next phase of the struggle. This struggle is going to intensify. I mean, the contradiction with SEIU is that, you know, like most labor leaders that are completely oriented and spend way too much of the wages of their workers putting in the coffers of the Democratic Party, SEIU likes to have an easy organizing drive where maybe they get a sweetheart deal, you know, and they don't have to do anything, and you know, and in some cases they've done that. You know, they don't get in it to have a pitch class battle that turns into some instances into a big struggle of the kind that workers engaged in the 30s when they were organizing the big industries. You know, that's going to happen sooner or later. Whether it happens on Thursday, we don't know. We do know that the last time they had a U.S.-based strike, there was retaliation. The biggest one in New York was the firing of almost 30 Domino's workers, which the struggle got hired after a while. But it could be much different now. You know, this is moving toward a showdown, regardless of the playbook of SEIU leaders. They're in it, and they may want an easy road, but the road may not be easy, and they just have to deal with it. But, you know, this informs my final point here, comrades. We have to think a lot harder and work a lot harder and strategize a lot harder about building a revolutionary militant pole in this movement. Not just for us and the effect that has on building a revolutionary vanguard party. And those things are mutually dependent on each other. But for that struggle of low-wage workers, as it becomes more critical and more militant, either because the bosses want to throw down or the workers are prepared to throw down. And that's the direction that it's going. We have to build this radical pole. The Social Democrats The Democrats, the moderates, the liberals, who have a big say and have the money, they don't want revolutionaries in this. They didn't want them 70 or 80 years ago. But, you know, the workers wanted them and needed them, and they got in. We can't just go back, you know, and look at history and how that happened, because everything that happened in the past does not exactly happen the same way. You know, capitalism is organized on a completely different basis in many ways than it was 100 years ago or 80 years ago. But we've got to build this revolutionary pole, you know. We cannot let obstacles like those who don't want revolutionaries in this movement stop us. If we do that, we might as well close up shop or change our name and not call ourselves Workers' World Party. And it's a huge challenge. I think about it night and day. I can barely sleep because of it. And I know I'm not the only comrade who does that. And I want more comrades to share that. This is a global uprising in an incipient stage. And Workers' World Party, what a name. Global Strike, Workers' World Party. You know, it fits. This is a strike that we should be all over and in, and analyzing it, and what does it mean, and what's the next phase. I hope that the next strike, which is global, whenever that comes, whether it's in the fall, I hope that we know much more about it in advance and are able to really organize solidarity and also put pressure on unions. I mean, I look on the websites of the local central labor councils of the different unions, and I don't see it. And I wonder why. Why aren't they blasting May 15th all over the place? What's more important next Thursday than, you know, this strike, this global strike of fast food workers? They brought some of the workers from other countries to the press conference here. You had workers speaking in French, black workers speaking in French who work at McDonald's in Paris. You know, it's global. I mean, just think of the workers who hear about it, who are not in this struggle, who are working at Staples or some other retailer or some other pizza shop, you know, whatever the circumstances. When they hear that low-wage workers had a global strike, you know, just think about how it affects their consciousness. Well, they did that. It's exactly the same issue. We can't survive on $7.25 or $8, and we need our rights and so forth. You know, at some point it becomes contagious. You know, I hope that we get enough notice for the next big action. What we're able to do next Thursday will be minimal, but it's important. I know in Baltimore, where there isn't much low-wage worker organizing going on by SEIU, they're going to have a solidarity action, and we'll get information on that. Some other branches are going to the events that the union is planning, and in some places the union is not as top down as it is in New York. New York is next to Washington. I mean, the labor bureaucracy is very top down, you know, unfortunately. But we shouldn't let that frustrate us. That's no excuse not to be involved and say, well, we'll just do other stuff, you know, because we won't be an influence in the working class for progressive or revolutionary reasons, whatever. Here in New York, we have an opening. What is that opening for Thursday? The last strike they had on December 5th, 2013, the Social Democrats had a culminating event in Foley Square. You all remember. We went there. You know, but we felt marginalized. We handed out our literature, whatever. We had done a couple of things before that at McDonald's and Wendy's and a few other stores on Broadway. But this time they're not calling anything. This time they're not calling anything. So it's up to others to call it. And I believe we should. I believe we should. And, you know, we've been talking to some of our allies, and what we're thinking about is there's a McDonald's in Times Square. It's on 42nd Street between 7th and 8th Avenue. It has a theater marquee look. It is the biggest metropolitan McDonald's in the world. You know, I mean, not to be confused with some of these suburban McDonald's, which are huge. Some of them are cavernous. But in terms of a McDonald's in a city, inside a city, this is the biggest one. And we're thinking of doing it right there, seeing if we can get a crowd that says, we're with these workers. And we're going to try that next Thursday at 5 o'clock. Now you might ask, well, why don't we go with the workers? We could do that, and we will do that. We'll find out as best as we can all of the restaurants that are doing it, and maybe some of us who can make it will be there at 6 a.m. in the morning, or 7 or 8, which is what they're doing in Philadelphia, and maybe we'll do something during the lunch hours too. But it's important for us to do something when we can get the credit for it without trying to take credit away from the workers themselves, which is absurd. But the credit as an independent force with its allies that is to the left. It's necessary for us to do that, not only to show that we support the workers, but to show that those who are not necessarily in with the leadership of the unions can take their own independent actions in solidarity with the workers. It's time for us to show that and to do it in our name. And to be as left as we can be, as long as we make sense. And that, the bottom line message is solidarity. We have to think about that more and more. And we have to be bold about it. Because there may be many things that we have to do to build that pole that I'm talking about. But being bold and learning how to be independent, learning how and when to show that there's an independent movement, even if it's only symbolic, is very important. Otherwise, no matter what else we do, we could be there with the big crowd, that's necessary sometimes. But you can also be taken in tow too. And over a period of time, lose whatever semblance of independence you have. That's understandable, but we can't let that happen. Not for us, and for as many radicals and militants and activists as we can put our hand on and place from wherever they are into Times Square on Thursday. And again, not to forget, just 48 hours after that, we'll be in Brooklyn at Local 808 having our low-wage solidarity assembly. Thank you.